This is Sweden, the newest member of NATO, marking a historic shift as their modern-day geopolitics were traditionally characterized by a policy of armed neutrality and cooperative peacekeeping, as well as diplomatic efforts with both the West and Russia. However, Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed all of this, and in May 2022, Sweden and Finland took a major step away from neutrality and applied for NATO membership. And while Finland was accepted into NATO after just 11 months, it took 21 months until NATO finally accepted Sweden, because Turkey and Hungary had some conditions before accepting their membership bids. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that this move makes NATO stronger than ever before, but in fact Sweden's acceptance into NATO has actually exposed one of NATO's larger weaknesses. And to understand what that is, we need to answer three important questions. Why does Sweden joining NATO change the game? Why was there still so much opposition within NATO? And finally, what does this all tell us about the state of NATO's alliance today? The history of the Baltics is pretty important for understanding why Sweden wasn't already a member of the NATO alliance, as during the Cold War, the Baltic was a major frontier between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, where the Soviet Union exerted its control from the border of Finland, down the Baltic coast of the Soviet Union, and across Poland all the way to the border of the two Germanys. On the other side, there are the NATO countries, with Denmark, West Germany, and Norway creating the boundary between the Soviet-controlled Eastern Europe and the Allied-controlled West, with these Baltic states holding a pivotal position within Russia's expansion plans, serving as the gateway to the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Control over the Baltic states allowed the Soviet Union to establish naval bases that could monitor and potentially control maritime traffic entering and leaving the Baltic Sea. But Sweden, in its unique geographic position, maintained a strong policy of neither aligning with the West nor with the East, whilst maintaining a highly capable and specialized military. This tradition within Swedish defense stems from a long history of military conflict between Russia and Sweden right throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, where during the era of the Swedish Empire, the Swedish dominated the Baltic Sea as a major European power, contesting control of large parts of Scandinavia and clashing with states like Russia for dominance of the Nordic region. However, it was with the Treaty of Roskilde in 1658 that Sweden's territorial expansion finally reached its peak, acquiring significant territories in Northern Europe. But after the subsequent Great Northern War of 1700 to 1721, Russia would emerge victorious and solidify itself as a major power here in the theatre. And Sweden lost important territories to Russia, including parts of today's Finland, Estonia, and Latvia, and leaving the Russian Empire as the leading power here in the Baltic Sea. Now, without getting into too much detail here, the relationship between these two would begin to settle down, and the 19th century would be marked by relative peace, with Sweden largely adopting a policy of neutrality, or on occasion even strategic alignment with Russia during the Napoleonic Wars. And this Swedish policy of neutrality would extend forward right throughout both of the world wars, with Stockholm sitting on the sidelines, while the neighbouring Baltic Sea served as a key battleground for naval operations during both wars. And after Germany's surrender in 1945, Moscow would take full advantage of its reinforced positions here in the Soviet republics of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And during this period, Moscow would invest heavily into its military assets here in the Baltic, seeking to monitor maritime traffic, smuggle in goods from the West, and prepare its strategic positions in case of any potential conflict scenario with the West. All of that would come undone though, as following the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia would be forced to withdraw its military forces from the three newly independent Baltic states. Now, despite Sweden's official stance of neutrality, the country has, in practice, engaged much more extensively with Western nations when it comes to their military equipment and infrastructure, having even specifically designed much of their equipment with NATO compatibility in mind. Then in 2004, the region would see another geopolitical shakeup, with all three Baltic states joining NATO, seeking security guarantees against any potential future aggression from a rearming Russia. Then, just 20 years later, the region would go through one more shakeup, with Finland and Sweden joining NATO in 2023 and 2024, transforming the formerly dominated Baltic Sea into what is essentially a NATO lake. And for NATO, this was a big deal, as many military experts would argue that Sweden is the single most strategic state anywhere in the Baltic Sea, and a major asset for any defense plan of the Baltic states. You see, before Sweden joined, studies from numerous sources shed a grim prognosis regarding NATO's ability to defend the Baltic states, with many suggesting that in a non-nuclear scenario, should Russia choose to invade the Baltics, its armoured forces would potentially steamroll into the country and occupy the cities of Riga and Tallinn within the first 60 hours, with Lithuania falling not long after that. For Brussels, this would have meant making a decision between two bad options, having to choose between either abandoning the Baltics to the Russians in order to give NATO time to properly build up forces in Poland, or try and rush troops into the Baltics regardless of the cost in an effort to prevent Russia from capitulating these three states and drastically shortening their front line. And in a scenario like this, they only had three possible routes for resupply. The main route being this highway through the Suwalki Gap, squeezed between Kaliningrad and Belarus, an especially treacherous position and one that most analysts expected to be closed pretty quickly, essentially trapping any NATO forces positioned here in the Baltic states. The only alternatives for resupply either involved navigating the Baltic Sea, a route that would take these convoys dangerously close to Kaliningrad, an area bristling with anti-ship and anti-aircraft threats. However, with Finland and Sweden joining NATO, that scenario has practically been reversed. Sweden's ascension into NATO also introduces three pivotal geographic advantages to the alliance, the first of which being the island of Gotland. The island serves as a significant military advantage due to its position, offering control over nearby maritime and air traffic routes, whilst also serving as a forward base for NATO, enhancing its surveillance, defense, and control capabilities in the region. However, this isn't the only geographic advantage that NATO has just acquired, the other being here in the Arctic, as this unified northern front becomes increasingly significant as climate change continues to unlock new sea lanes and resource extraction opportunities here in the north, amplifying both the Arctic region's commercial and military value, with the increased military activity here in the region already catching the attention of both Arctic states like Russia, as well as non-Arctic states such as China. In response to this increased competition, Sweden has already begun enhancing its military footprint here in the Arctic, including initiating the construction of 2 new garrisons here. This move being part of a broader strategy to bolster defense capabilities in an area where Russia has been notably expanding its military now for a while. Now for NATO, by integrating Sweden into the alliance, they've significantly boosted their Arctic credentials, benefiting from not only Sweden's infrastructure, but also expertise in polar operations, as well as reinforcing its deterrence and defense posture here in the region. Now, while Sweden may not have a massive standing force, Sweden's military is equipped with some of the most advanced equipment and weaponry available in Europe, including its fleet of state-of-the-art tanks, aircraft, and custom-designed vehicles, all of which were purposely engineered for the specific challenges of the terrains here in Northern Europe. Sweden's air force is also quite a prominent force here in the Nordic region, and stands as one of Europe's most capable air fleets, with the Swedish fleet already comprising just under 100 jets, with plans also underway to enhance this fleet even further in the near future. More impressively though, Sweden's defense industry is among Europe's largest, generating $3 billion in 2022 and exporting over $2 billion in defense materials in just the last year, with its production capacity only expected to grow, as the government has just committed to nearly doubling the defense budget across 2024. Recent Swedish exercises also suggest that Sweden's cyber capabilities are also already among the most sophisticated within Europe, indicating that Sweden's also likely to be a strong contributor to NATO's cyber defense capabilities as well. So if Sweden provides all these benefits, why did it take 21 months for NATO to accept Sweden's application, whilst Finland's was accepted in less than a year? A situation even more remarkable considering that after Russia's invasion, it was more important than ever for NATO to demonstrate political unity in the face of an aggressive Russia. Instead, Sweden's bid was blocked due to opposition from Hungary and Turkey, both of whom would make demands before they would give assurances not to use their veto during the official vote. First, Turkey demanded that Sweden cracks down on the PKK, a Kurdish separatist group, as well as anti-Muslim demonstrations that had been happening within Sweden, partly in an effort to combat terrorism, and partly in an effort to court religious voters before the upcoming Turkish elections. However, Sweden traditionally puts a high value on freedom of speech, which meant allowing organisations like the PKK to protest in public in Sweden. But to please their potential Turkish allies, Sweden would eventually make concessions, promise to take these issues seriously, and do more against Kurdish extremism. But this was all in mid-2022, so why did it take until January 2024 for Turkey to officially accept Sweden's bid? Well, this goes to Turkey's main demand of Washington, that they not sell F-35s to Greece. However, after some stern words from the White House, Turkey would back down from these demands, with Greece set to receive F-35s and Turkey set to receive F-16s. This left Hungary as the only member that didn't approve Sweden's bid until late February, as according to the Hungarian government, they felt insulted by the Swedish critique against Hungary's constitutional state, with Hungary stating that it required a process of building trust between the two countries. However, similar to the Turkish acceptance, it seems that some kind of military deal played a role here as well. As part of the deal, Hungary would receive 4 JAS-39 Gripen jets from the Swedish, as well as a discounted maintenance contract for their existing fleet of 14 Gripen jets that Hungary currently leases from the Swedish. As part of the deal, in 2026, those jets would also be transferred into Hungarian ownership. Moreover, Sweden also confirmed that it would be establishing a new Saab manufacturing center opening up in Hungary. Now, neither Hungary nor Turkey want their acceptance of Sweden into NATO to be seen by the outside world as any sort of transactional agreement. But essentially, that's what this was. Turkey and Hungary weaponizing the principle of unanimity within NATO in order to reach unrelated strategic objectives. And this dynamic poses several problems for the alliance, as firstly it caused the delay of essential initiatives, and slows down the alliance's ability to react quickly and respond to threats. And secondly, having alliance members leveraging their veto power undermines the unity of the alliance, with concerns that Hungary's gains within this round may incentivize others to leverage future defense crises for their own political gain, which in turn creates a third risk for NATO, as having seen all of this play out, NATO's adversaries in the future could potentially look to manipulate the leaders of certain NATO members into taking advantage of the organization's unanimity to prevent NATO action in those absolutely critical moments. And whilst NATO's expansion has likely secured peace for many of these states in the east of Europe, it's in this issue we can observe the potential complications that come from expanding an alliance. See, back when NATO was formed in 1949, it was built around a small collective of Western democracies, all of which were united against a common threat. But one could argue that the subsequent expansion may have undermined some of the initial unity within the alliance, as by integrating more members, or with diverse interests and values, into one cohesive alliance that requires significant diplomatic effort and compromise, it could potentially impact the alliance's effectiveness and cohesion going forward. So the problem that Turkey and Hungary's power plays here have possibly exposed is that NATO, whilst gaining more in strength on the battlefield, may have discovered some vulnerabilities within the boardroom. And in future, if, God forbid, Article 5 were ever to be called upon, NATO might first find themselves fighting a bidding war, whilst the real war moves past them on the battlefield. Thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed hearing about the difficulties and logistics surrounding naval invasions, we go into all of that in much more detail here in our video unpacking a theoretical invasion of North Korea, which you can check out by clicking the box here.